Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 7 of Quattroporte, the review series for the 4-door sports and super saloons that are featured on GT6. And in this episode, kind of like last week's episode for the Mercedes 190e, this is one of the lesser powered sports saloons. And really it is a sports saloon rather than a full-on super saloon. And the vehicle in question is the saloon version of Honda's legendary Civic Type R. Now personally, I actually really like this car and I prefer it to the hatchback version of the Civic. I've never been a particular fan of the hatchback, but as a saloon, I just think it's cool. I feel the same way about the Integra as well. I just think it looks better with 4 doors. But what does this car have to offer? Well, it's got a very good engine. It's a 2-litre, obviously VTEC. It's naturally aspirated, interestingly, so no turbo, no supercharger to help you. But despite that seeming disadvantage, it still puts out a very respectable 395 horses, fully tuned, which is actually very good when you think about it. As far as torque, not surprisingly, being a Honda, the torque isn't all that high at 241 pound-feet. But it's a very lightweight car, so it doesn't need a huge amount of torque, especially when it's front-wheel drive. Now, it only weighs 1,039 kilos, and thanks to that, combined with its pretty decent naturally aspirated power, it produces 380 horsepower per tonne, which for a lesser-powered saloon is still a very respectable power-to-weight ratio. Now, the PP, incidentally, when fully tuned, can be anywhere up to 534 pp if you fit the flat floor, as I have on this particular model. Obviously I wouldn't recommend fitting the flat floor if you plan on using it for top speed, and without the flat floor the pp is slightly lower. But even without it, it has excellent handling, tons of grip, and it's a very fun car to drive. Now, having less power and far less torque than many of the other cars in this series, you'd probably assume that it's at a bit of a loss against them around most tracks. And although to some degree that is correct, this car is in many ways quite similar in the way it delivers its performance and the way it drives to the Mercedes 190e, in that although it doesn't have a huge amount of power or torque, it's very light, very nimble, very easy to drive, and at the very least is a great way of introducing people to the concept of sports saloons. Because although you'd think driving a sports saloon would essentially just be a longer version of driving a hot hatch, that's really not the case, because the way the weight is distributed in the car, the way the car's handled through corners because of the longer wheelbase, the effect that that has off the line with weight distribution, etc., is completely different to a hatchback. And saloons tend to have more understeer, generally, than hatchbacks because of the longer wheelbase, but in some scenarios that can actually work to your advantage. It makes the car naturally more stable, less skittish, and generally smoother in their handling. Now, in the case of the Honda, it's a front-wheel drive sports saloon, which is quite rare on Gran Turismo. Most of them are rear-wheel drive and the occasional all-wheel drive model. Very, very few front-wheel drive hot hatches, and most of the front-wheel drive, or super saloons I should say, not hot hatches, but most of the front-wheel drive super saloons, primarily sports saloons really, come from Honda, the Accord, the Civic, etc. And as we all know, Honda is very good at small capacity, high revving engines and front-wheel drive chassis, and this car is a perfect display of that. Now, is it on the level of an Impreza or an Evo? Of course not. But is it a good car? Well, certainly. Now, I'd say the main downside to this car is how much of a specialist vehicle it is. Now, it may not seem like a specialist vehicle, and technically speaking, it's kind of not. But what I mean by that is its specific performance and PP is at such a unique level to this car in all of its specs and layout combined that it doesn't really have many rivals. The only rivals that it really has are other Hondas. I guess you could say that the Mercedes 190e is a reasonably good rival for this car, but again, the only facts that they share are that they are lesser powered saloons. Apart from that, they don't share much in common. But overall, the Honda is an excellent track car. Of course, in a straight line, it's not going to beat very much. But if you use it on a track which requires more technical handling, and you need a car where, rather than outright speed, is good at high average speeds, then this car is very good at that. Tracks such as Sierra, for instance, where you don't necessarily need crazy top speeds for most of the track, but you do need to maintain very high speeds through all of the corners. And that's what this car can do, which is impressive for a front-wheel drive chassis, which is generally known for, as we said earlier, understeer. But as far as understeer goes, this car doesn't have very much. And that's to its credit, really. And one of the best things about this car is the price, because it only costs 28,000 credits, which significantly undercuts many of the other four-door saloons. And although I said its range of effectiveness is limited, it does still have some pretty good rivals like the Mazda 6 MPS, Mercedes 190e to some degree, etc. So that's it for this review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.